this morning is the Reverend Kelli Clement. She serves 2 congregations. She's an assistant minister at the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, where her portfolio includes social justice and welcome. She's also a quarter-time minister at the St. Croix UU Fellowship in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin. At First Unitarian Society, she manages the role of congregation as plaintiff in the lawsuit Doe versus Minnesota. She's the former executive director of the Minnesota Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice and a graduate of United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities, where she is on the adjunct faculty. Using art play as spiritual practice, Kelli loves to play in paint, paper, and glue. She lives near Lake Nokomis with husband Mike, college sophomore Sofia, and mini-poodle Memphis. She will talk to us this morning about after the Fall of Roe, where we go from here. Obviously a very timely topic. Please welcome Reverend Kelli Clement.
Thank you, Amanda, and hello, UUs in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's a joy to be back with you. I think I was with you several years ago, probably talking about this same topic, and I wish I could be with you in person today, but my other duties here at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis don't allow me to do that. So thanks for letting me be with you via Zoom. We'll have some time for discussion after my talk today. So I'm hoping that if you have questions, we can address them then. When the Unitarian Universalist Association was asking for folks to contribute poetry and readings and things like that to their worship materials around reproductive justice, I wrote this piece for the UUA. And I titled it, Learn to Tell Your Story. My most impactful life decisions in chronological order: to have abortions when I needed them, to get sober, to give birth to our child. If each life is precious, so is mine, so is hers, so is yours. I do not regret nor feel shameful about my abortions. Rather, I am grateful for access to abortion care by compassionate, professional providers, and for, as Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison has said, the opportunity to captain my own ship. A wish list for all of us, especially my adult child's generation. Robust reproductive justice, health, and freedom without stigma or restriction. An end to heteronormative, patriarchal, white supremacy culture, and love and liberation in abundance. May it be so. Well, I've given this sermon a few times in a few different places well before this week, and I felt like I just had to pick it up and throw it out as I come to you today, because so much has happened this week. As is true in this work for reproductive justice, things happen all the time. Changes are happening, and sometimes they happen very quickly. You know that in January, we passed the 49th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and many of us anticipate that it will be the last, as that decision stands as the law of the land. So while we take some time to grieve the loss of this best tool to determine when and whether to parent, I think we need to work on our understanding that something better must come along after the fall of Roe. In movement spaces, reproductive rights activists say that Roe was the floor, not the ceiling. Roe was the floor, not the ceiling. It guaranteed a right, But without access, such a right rings hollow. I know that many of you have read lots of analysis this week, so maybe this will reinforce it. It may be redundant to you, but this is what the landscape is. Currently, 89% of counties in the United States do not have an abortion clinic, including yours. Roe was never enough. And I think we have made of Roe an idol. It certainly has been the last best hope for reproductive rights in the United States. And for half a century, Roe has allowed people the idea of planning their lives, the opportunity to captain their own ship, the right of bodily autonomy. But it never guaranteed access. It didn't stop restriction after restriction, which now puts reproductive justice out of the reach of millions of Americans. That was before this week. As activist Loretta Ross said, choice is not worth much to women who have no choices and, by extension, have no access to reproductive health care. Roe didn't stop political fighting and the packing of the courts to render it impotent. So activists today say we are not anticipating a post-Roe future. It's the reality now. So I'm really interested to talk about what happens after the fall of Roe, sooner than later, and where we go from here. As Maya Angelou taught us, you do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better. So I want to start with kind of a frame, an upper level frame, from a new book by gender studies scholar Kyla Schuler that's called The Trouble with White Women. Professor Schuler teaches that there have been two streams of feminism since the beginning of the concept in the 1880s. She contrasts white feminism with intersectional feminism. White feminism upholds systems of entrenched power and demands that white women be given access to them. Intersectional feminism envisions new structures, centers marginalized voices, racial justice tied to reproductive justice. As we sing in our song, intersectional feminism is indeed focused on building a new way. You know how when an idea is new to you, you begin to see it everywhere. That's what happens for me. I am on what I believe will be a lifelong quest to root out the places where white supremacy culture has its hooks in me. As a person with white body, I walk in the world as a white-bodied middle-class person, and I receive the privilege that attaches to that. And so I'm trying to figure out where that privilege is rooted in me that's I'm unaware of. And so this new to me idea about white feminism taps a deep root. Pro-choice feminism has been centered in part on the idea of being able to reach the heights of any profession or career without being derailed by an unwanted pregnancy. The profound shift that has happened in the past 30 years is from a frame of pro-choice, I want to reach the height of any career in a society as it exists, to a frame of reproductive justice, intersectional, let's build a new way, a society where there's more equity for everyone. Black women scholars and activists have articulated a human rights frame of reproductive justice starting in the mid-90s. Loretta Ross and others sought to remove the focus from just the womb, from the immediate decision of whether or not to continue a pregnancy, to a much more holistic vision. And their vision of reproductive justice demands the right to have children, the right to not have children, the right to nurture the children we have in a safe and healthy environment. These three are the framework of reproductive justice: the right to have children, the right to not have children, and the right to nurture the children we have in safe and healthy environments. It's more than just a moment of decision. This reproductive justice frame involves the entire lifespan of a parent, a child, the whole community. It acknowledges the intersection of class and race and gender. Reproductive justice is racial justice. And so when I look for organizations to support, I am looking for those with a reproductive justice lens. One piece of language that I want to lift up from those people who are working on reproductive justice and really bring an intersectional frame to this is who gets pregnant. The activists that we hear today are talking about when people get pregnant, not when women get pregnant, so that trans people and non-binary people and gender non-conforming people are included in that. So it may seem a small thing, but when I change my language with it, I am including, I'm going forward in the way I mean to continue. And I say, when people need access to reproductive health care, when people need abortion care, rather than just focusing on women, I invite you to try that language on as we include our trans siblings, our non-binary and gender non-conforming siblings into this conversation. The other piece of language that I really want to lift up is the language that many of us learned and have been comfortable with for a long time, the language of safe, legal, and rare. We've been saying for a long time, let's keep abortion safe, legal, and rare. I've stopped using that frame. The word rare carries with it a stigma that some abortions are okay and others are not. I had 2 abortions in the mid-80s, and it was not until this year that I began to talk about my abortions plural because of that stigma. And I've been doing this work for a long time. 1 abortion might have been okay, but 2 was just stupid. That was just, how could you be so stupid? Now I know that I made the best decision for myself, for my family, that I could. And it was absolutely my right to make that decision. So now I say, let's keep abortion safe, legal, and accessible. I invite you to drop that rare because of the way it stigmatizes people who have more than 1 abortion procedure. Think about that. Okay, so Roe's going away. I mean, it just is. It may or may not go completely. The decision that was leaked may or may not get the rough, ugly edges sheared off of it, but it's the goal. And that's where we're headed. I'll explain just a little bit about the 2 cases that you hear a great deal about. Now, the Roe case, you know, was decided in 73, and it provided a legal framework, 1 for privacy and 2 for viability. It said that people had a right to privacy up until the moment of fetal viability, when the fetus could live outside the womb. And to be sure, medical advances have pushed that number back earlier in pregnancy, right? The number of weeks, but it's still at about between 21 and 23 weeks is the moment of viability. The decision of Casey v. Pennsylvania, was the one that said people have a right to, states can regulate abortion if they don't place an undue burden on the person seeking access. And so all of these laws that we've seen, 1,300 laws since Roe v. Wade was decided, 1,300 laws across the United States since Roe was decided, are mostly attest to Casey, how many restrictions can we put on that don't constitute an undue burden? Is it an undue burden that a clinic has to have hallways the size of a surgical clinic? Is it an undue burden that a person has to wait 24 or 48 or 72 hours after they've received a state mandated script until they have their procedure? Is it an undue burden that in Minnesota, under the age of 16, a person has to get permission from both of their parents, whether they have a relationship with them or not, in order to have an abortion procedure or get a judicial bypass? By the way, they don't have to have any permission from their parents to have a birth, to give birth. Casey was about restrictions, right? So that's a little bit of the framework. Roe is about viability and Casey is about restrictions. In Minnesota, we have 5 abortion clinics in Minnesota. The closest one to you is Rochester. 1 in Rochester, 1 in Duluth, and 3 in the Twin Cities. In Wisconsin, I believe I am correct that all of the abortion clinics are on the eastern side of the state, Milwaukee, Madison. You can correct me if there's one more in the western part of the state. We expect that when Roe falls, that Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota will fall in rapid succession, and that Minnesota, which has a protection due to a Minnesota Supreme Court case that protects access to abortion in Minnesota, we expect abortion will remain legal here longer. Not that our elected officials won't try to put up restrictions against it and laws like we've seen in other states, but it will be harder here to get through. That's why our elections are so important here. So Minnesotans are continuing to prepare to be a receiving state. We're already seeing patients from Texas, from Oklahoma, from Mississippi, from other states that are enacting these incredibly draconian laws, and the dominoes will continue to tumble. So activists are doing a lot of asset mapping, and we're figuring out how we can have a cadre of volunteers, an abortion brigade that can help give people rides and get them to the clinic and give them comfort care and that sort of thing. Our clinics are already having longer wait times. We expect Illinois to remain legal, and clinics in Chicago, I'm told, are already booking out close to a month. When you're pregnant and you need to terminate your pregnancy, a month is a really long time. Okay. But there are things we can do. All hope is not lost. So I want to share a few things with you that I think are quite positive, and I'll share a few lines from a blog post that I wrote this week, and then I want to open it up for us to have some conversation. Learn to tell your story if it is safe for you to do so. If you have had an abortion, or if you have not, if you are the partner of someone who has had an abortion, if you have some connection to a reproductive health story, learn to tell your story without shame or stigma. We never expected to have to tell our stories. This is our private business, but our opposition has used our privacy as shame and stigma. And I'm not having it for myself. I'm in the no shame game, and they don't get to tell me that I'm ashamed of what I did. I'm not. I don't regret, and I'm not shameful. I'm glad that I'm able to have the life and the family that I have now, be the parent that I am now, because I was able to make the choices I was able to. You can work for candidates who are pro-choice, and let your electeds know, let your candidates know that you are a person of faith, that you're a part of a religious community. We don't talk about that inside our communities very much, but outside it's really important. I'm a person of faith and I am pro-choice because of my faith, not in spite of it. Your beautiful words talk about shared values. We have shared values. We share the value of absolute sovereignty over our bodies. And we believe that out of the flames of hate comes love. The love for people who need care when they need it. That's a religious value to me. That's a faith value. And I'll go to the mat for that. And I want my elected officials to know that. Here in the People's Republic of South Minneapolis, I don't need to work for, well, we won't tell Representative Emma Goodman this. I love her. But she doesn't need me to work so hard for her. She's going to get reelected. But I can work in the suburbs here for people who are less likely to. I can door knock for people who are maybe on the fence about choice and help them speak out about it. I want to ask them specifically, do you stand for a person's right to make their own healthcare decisions? Do you stand for a right to privacy? Do you support gay marriage? Do you support people being able to make their own healthcare and life decisions? I don't want to have any ambiguity about that. I don't want them to step around it. I want them to be on record about it. So that's the thing we can do. And through the organization UU the Vote, we can, the Unitarian Universalists are organizing us to work in districts that really need us. And Wisconsin is a state that we're really working on. I know you're hard up against it, you progressives in Wisconsin. I appreciated Ron saying something about the younger people. I sometimes hear older feminists say, where are all the young people in the movement? They are leading the way. There is lots of online organizing. I think this is not our grandmother's pro-choice movement. And the thing I would really invite us to shift in our language here is to not use the fear tactics of the coat hanger and the back alley abortion. This is not 1970. We are not going back to 1970. Ron also pointed me to the really excellent article in a recent Atlantic magazine about the abortion underground. There is so much more information, technology, and ways to share that information than we had in 1970. There is medication abortion, the abortion pills, there is self-managed abortion, and there are ways to do this more safely, and there are ways for us to connect through online media with each other and to be able to help people who need access to abortion care. It's a matter of faith, and what I am holding on to is not that hatred. Boy, I was having a rage stroke this week, but out of the flames of hate come my intense love for people and their right to absolute sovereignty over their bodies. May it be so today, tomorrow, and forever.